Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining the President Obama's Political Payoff conference call. Mr. Kurt Kashar, you may now begin.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our press conference call regarding President Obama's political payoffs. We have Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli on the line with us. He will discuss how federal grants and loan guarantees to President Obama's political supporters have cost taxpayers billions of dollars while failing to create jobs or help middle-class families. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Attorney General Cuccinelli.
Good afternoon, and thank all of you all for joining us today. Obviously, this is a subject that is sensitive for many Americans, that being that, the president famously said not too long ago the private sector was doing fine. Well, most people in the private sector don't think that, but there is a small select group of them that are getting their political payoffs from President Obama while the middle class gets its layoffs. The political cronies for the president are doing just fine. That part of the private sector is perfectly happy. But the middle class is still struggling and continues to do so, has for over 40 months of over 8% unemployment with no end in sight. So while those middle-class Americans continue to suffer, President Obama's political pals are definitely doing fine. And that's largely thanks to the billions of dollars from taxpayers that the president has steered back to his political donors, his bundlers. The president promised that his stimulus, to start off less than a month after he was sworn in, would bring the economy back. You remember, under 8% by June, and that his green energy program would create millions of new jobs. And instead, we've got names synonymous with bankruptcy and waste or worse, like Solyndra being the most infamous of them all. And as I said, we haven't been below 8% unemployment in that stretch. So President Obama's political payoffs have cost us billions of dollars, have cost taxpayers billions of dollars in grants and loan guarantees, but they've completely failed to create jobs or help middle-class families. And the numbers in this are just staggering. They're mind-boggling to ordinary Americans. Solyndra went bankrupt, and that cost taxpayers more than $500 million, and 1,100 workers lost their jobs. And I would also note that the taxpayers, even in issuing that grant through our federal government, that wasn't even done legally, in the sense that we weren't given the position in the bankruptcy that the law said we were supposed to have. The Obama folks even insulated Solyndra from that. Fisker Automotive, another $500 million, but they don't even make any cars here. They have a plant in Delaware that's empty, but they're manufacturing cars in Finland. Another $500 million went to First Wind in grants and loans, conveniently enough, after hiring a lobbying firm run by one of Obama's bundlers and a former Joe Biden aide. And adding up to the total of those three by itself, Bright Source Energy got about over $1.5 billion loan guarantee, also after they hired a former aide to Joe Biden as a lobbyist. It seems like a great way to make big money is to go through the Joe Biden shop and then turn to the Obama presidential administration to pull down taxpayer-funded loans and grants. These companies are just the most prominent examples of how the Obama administration has handed out our taxpayer money to all their friends and their allies, while middle-class families all across America, including in Virginia, are bearing the unfortunate weight of the president's failed policies. President Obama has made an awful lot of promises that he hasn't kept. To cut the deficit in half. You remember that one? Well, of course, in less than a month after he was sworn in with the stimulus package, in one bill, he managed to double it. To hold down unemployment, I've addressed that. He promised that by June, the stimulus bill would have gotten us below 8%, and we haven't been below 8% in over 40 months. And there are so many Americans that are so depressed about the job market, they've literally dropped out of the market, because one of the president's other promises was to create millions of new jobs. Well, we have 500,000 less jobs today than when he took office. So much for that promise. But he certainly kept his promises to his big campaign donors and his political cronies, who've gotten special access, and they've gotten billions of taxpayer dollars for their interests and for their companies, whether it made sense or not, and usually not. Mitt Romney knows that we need to make government smaller, we need to make government simpler, we need to make government smarter. And that includes getting rid of President Obama's political payoffs and turning and focusing on policies that encourage private sector job creation without government lifelines and that give middle-class families a chance to get ahead, not President Obama's bundlers. Long-term unemployment's at record levels. Incomes and net worth are down, tragically down. There's been more destruction of wealth under this president than I can possibly remember, and the middle class is struggling. We do not need 4 more years of political payoffs, of taxpayer giveaways, and of political cronyism. We need a plan to fix our economy, and we need a president who knows that on day one, his job one is fixing the economy. And that has not happened with this president. It has not happened with this president. He is only now desperately backfilling on the economy while he tries to blame everyone else for everything else that has gone wrong under his leadership, except his own leadership, his own guidance for this country and for our Congress. You know, in Virginia, we're also rather sensitive to his failure in leadership and these payoffs because we watch this money going out to all of his political pals while we're staring down the barrel of the most massive defense cuts in history, short of coming out of, say, World War II. In Virginia, we know that those defense cuts aren't just going to hurt our economy. We accept some shrinkage in government, but when you attack it all on the defense budget, we know that our national security is going to suffer from that, and we're very concerned about that in Virginia. We'd like to see no more political payoffs. We want a president like a President Romney who will get the economy going and get us out from under long-term unemployment of over 8% and get the middle class moving again. That's the guts of America, and frankly, get more of our poor up into that middle class. We want people moving up, and Mitt Romney is the way to get there, and the pathway there is through November 6th. And I sure hope we see some change in that respect. I think Americans are fed up with the political payoffs they've been seeing, with the malarkey about the green energy jobs, that there'd be millions of jobs. Instead, there's been billions of dollars of political payoffs and no jobs really to show for it, at least in this country. They're doing pretty well in Finland with Fisker Automotive. Needless to say, it's a pretty frustrating thing to observe just as an American, and I think a lot of middle-class Americans are pretty fed up with it. The kind of access and paybacks that are coming out of this administration. So with that, I'm happy to turn and open up for questions for anybody who may have any. I'll do the best I can to answer.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you have a question, please press the number 1 key on your phone. Again, to ask a question at this time, please press the number 1 key on your phone now. Please hold while we allow the questions to come into queue. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, please press the number 1 key on your phone at this time. Our first question will come from David Shurinsky with Washington Times. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Attorney General.
Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you? I just wanted to ask, a lot of Republicans have been criticizing Governor Romney for not being sort of aggressive or, going on offense enough against the president. Do you think this could be a turning point in that? And, what are your thoughts on that notion?
You mean, do you think the discussion about the political payoffs?
Yes, today. I mean, he had some pretty strong words this morning on Fox and Friends about this very subject, where he, took it directly to the president, which is a departure, some would argue, from what he has been doing.
Well, I think Governor Romney is he's by nature a nicer guy than you're used to seeing in politics, and that's just who he is. But some of what President Obama has done is particularly infuriating, and I think this political payoffs is one of those sorts of items. And I think he gets fired up just like I get fired up, and by he I mean Governor Romney, over really how the taxpayers have been, I'll say stolen from, but what I mean is if anybody else did it, it'd be stealing, but since it's government, it's just cronyism. And frankly, I think he's absolutely right to be riled up about this. I'm riled up about it. I think ordinary Americans are infuriated the more they learn about these sorts of relationships. I mean, like 200 of President Obama's biggest donors have landed wonderful plum government jobs. I mean, I'm an attorney general. Look at the U.S. Attorney General's office. It seems to me the most similar factor between all of the top people in the United States Attorney General's office are that they were political bundlers. So it's even in the Justice Department. It's not just in green energy. It's not just in grants and loans from the government. They're doing this all over. I think there's an awful lot to be upset about. It's easy to get passionate and fired up about this for every American. And Governor Romney, like so many other Americans, is pretty upset with this. And I think that he's making a strong commitment that nobody seriously questions to make this sort of payoff go away under a Romney administration. But to do that, he's going to have to win on November 6th. So whether it's a whole trend or a whole course of pugilism in line with your question, I think if it's an issue that warrants being very blunt, very direct, and he steps outside of his I guess he's righteously upset about it, as am I, and are a lot of other Americans. So I don't know that I would say it's a trend in terms of getting tougher per se. I think that what we get out of Governor Romney is smarter, and we get competent. Even Bill Clinton called President Obama an amateur, and Governor Romney is anything but. He's capable of leading and focusing on the economy on day one, and that's something the middle class in this country will benefit from.
Okay. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, please press the number 1 key on your phone. Our next question will come from Steve Contorno with the Washington Examiner. Please go ahead.
Hey, Attorney General, this is Steve. Thanks for your time. I wanted to get your take on sort of what's changed for Governor Romney coming out of the debates you hosted. You were very critical of many of his answers, particularly on health care. I guess, is it an alienation of your own conservative principles to sort of be out there stumping for him now when you've been critical of him in the past?
My gosh, one of two people is going to be president come January of 2013, and America is going to stay in this economic downward spiral and losing its liberty if President Obama is reelected. A Governor Romney, hopefully soon to be President Romney, puts the brakes on all of that. This is a two-person choice. Every election is about choices, and Governor Romney is the only candidate who will make focusing on the economy his first priority. President Obama had his chance to do that, and it's taken him 3.5 years to get around to prioritizing it. Even then, it's only because he's on defense and he knows he's been ignoring what Americans care most about for his whole term. I don't think I don't have to sacrifice anything to get out here and campaign for Governor Romney. There is no more important election in my lifetime in Virginia than making sure Governor Romney wins Virginia in 2012.
Okay, and again, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please press the number 1 key on your phone. Our next question will come from Norman Leahy with BearingDrift.com. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, Ken. You and I have talked many times over the years about this issue, cronyism, crony capitalism. But let's be frank, it is bipartisan and it is ancient. How would Romney attack the cronyism that is so habitual and so ingrained on Capitol Hill, like in the Farm Bill or the Transportation Bill, the Export-Import Bank? The list goes on.
Yeah, I think you've got to start with a president who's committed to doing it, for starters. And there's no question you bring up particularly tough pieces of legislation when it comes to the question of cronyism and payoffs. It isn't just in the executive branch, but I don't think we've ever seen anything in the executive branch like the kind of direct payoffs we're seeing with President Obama, with his bundlers coming back and getting $500 million loans and grants and guarantees repeatedly for failing enterprises, even breaking their own rules over at the Energy Department about how those are given out and set up. I just don't think we've seen anything on this scale or this depth of brazenness before. And let's face it, the president runs the whole executive branch. So once these things are set up, it's all in the hands of the president and his appointees. I think that as it relates to reining in the Congress, I think there are going to be some lessons, and you're right, that are going to come from bipartisan experience for now Governor Romney, who would then be President Romney, about drawing lines in the sand to Congress about vetoing bills that go too far in that direction. And that goes to him wanting to make government smaller and simpler and smarter. Part of that is transparency. You may recall President Obama promised us the most transparent administration in history, and now we get things like fast and furious stonewalling, more rejected FOIAs than I can ever remember, and so on. And that kind of sea change needs to take place, and it isn't going to take place unless Romney wins this election.
Our next question will come from Benji Sarlin with TPM. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Attorney General. Thanks for hosting the call. So some open government groups are noting that they're a little skeptical of Romney's position, given that he doesn't even release his own bundlers, and the ones he does release are lobbyists who their stated job is to get aid for the government. Is there a single enforceable policy or ethics policy of any kind that Romney is proposing right now to solve this problem?
I don't think you can do this with one overarching, with one rule. That it hasn't worked with prior administrations. You really need to elect someone who's committed to weeding it out and to not making a political bundling the top requirement for a job application. I mean, Obama's put in about 200 of his biggest donors at a time when even Vice President Biden says, for millions of Americans, it's a depression out there. So for millions of Americans, we're all struggling, and President Obama's donors are doing great. That's really a decision of President Obama. It is not illegal for him to have picked all his political bundlers to be in these top positions and to be the gatekeepers to give money to other political bundlers. It's horrible policy. It's bad for America. And it needs to come to a stop. And the only way it's going to come to a stop is for someone who has run on stopping it and is committed to doing it in his own administration, and Governor Romney is that person.
Our next question will come from Tom White with Virginia Rights. Please go ahead.
Hey, Attorney General Cuccinelli, how are you?
Good afternoon. Good, thanks.
A question you just now touched on a little bit. Has anything that the Obama administration or Obama himself done risen to the point where there may be some type of criminal activity in this, or is he simply there's just no laws that will prevent this?
Nothing that I can speak to directly. Of course, I've taken the position on a wide range of things that they have done, that they have overstepped the boundaries of the law. We just sued the EPA last week for one more overstepping of the law, but that had nothing to do with the kind of access and cronyism that his political bundlers have been receiving. So that's why I make the point that Presidents can hire for the presidential appointee positions and presidential hiring positions who they'd like to, but it tells us an awful lot about this president, who has no experience in operating in a private economy, has no experience running a business, no experience bringing a business into being. And this is a guy who in Virginia, within only a couple of days ago, told, was frankly taking shots at business owners. When he told them in Roanoke, if you've got a business, you didn't build that, somebody else made that happen, as if you're lucky, and it's the grace of government that lets you achieve anything, not your hard work, your sweat equity, and you're willing to risk what capital you've got. I mean, he's got the world upside down, and the middle class in this country is paying for it. But the people who aren't paying for it, who are getting paid for it, are his political bundlers. They're doing just fine.
Our next question will come from Stephen Reeder with WNYC. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Attorney General. The point about cronyism and access for donors is all well taken, and it seems that the Disclose Act before the Senate today that is addressing the kind of problems in the same vein as your complaint, but Senate Republicans are promising to filibuster that. So I guess what I'm wondering is what is Romney's position on the Disclose Act, and how does that square with the complaint about the Obama administration that you're leveling today?
I think that what the governor has talked about is really what he would do in his own house with the executive branch. I don't know if he's taken a position on the Disclose Act or not. What I do know is that he has committed himself to weeding out the kind of cronyism we've been talking about today in the executive branch. Obviously, bills come over or don't from the Congress, and he's going to have to interact with them to either sign or veto those. And it's reasonable to expect, and it's certainly my understanding from the governor, that he's going to try to hold Congress to the same sort of standard, and would like to see them systematically hold themselves to that standard as well, and because it is going to put some bills at risk. I mean, if they don't, they're going to put bills at risk, and by that I mean when they come to Governor Romney, then President Romney, he's going to be put in a position where if Congress has not maintained any standards, they're going to risk a Romney veto, and I think that's when you extend the kind of discussion we're having here today about the executive branch into their relations with the legislature, the Congress. I think you can expect to see a substantive discussion on that subject take place with President Romney.
And our final question will come from Adele Stan with Alternate. Please go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for doing the call. My question is the one that will inevitably be asked, especially in the progressive blogosphere, and that is this kind of smacks of this whole, because this is a bipartisan problem, this sort of feels like an attempt to change the subject from the Bain storyline, which has sort of overtaken the political narrative in the last few weeks. Would you have any response to that?
Every race is about an awful lot of questions. I mean, especially the presidential race, which has got, you've got a 1,000 different domestic policy aspects and foreign policy on top of it. Certainly, Governor Romney believes that given all of those things, getting the economy moving is priority one, and that dumping taxpayer dollars to the benefit of your political cronies not only doesn't help achieve that, but actually makes our deficit worse. It detracts from that possibility, and that is the distraction. I mean, the focus ought to be on the top problem as the American people see it, and that is the economy. And this kind of political cronyism detracts from a president in office his ability to get the economy going, to start getting the deficit under control, which has such an impact on the ability of government to function long term. I mean, all of those are legitimate questions, but it's hard to get by these sorts of basic elements of unfairness to everyone else in America except Obama political bundlers, while everybody else in America's economy sputters and goes down the tube. As Vice President Biden said in Iowa a couple of weeks ago, it's a depression for millions and millions of Americans, and yet they keep pouring hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars at a time, into businesses of their political supporters, their political bundlers, their political cronies, and all while not prioritizing the economy. That there might be a more legitimate concern if from day one President Obama had made fixing the economy his top priority, but he didn't. What he made his top priority is political payoffs. That's what that stimulus bill was less than a month in. That's where a lot of this money came from for all of these crony benefits. It came from that bill. He didn't waste any time at all. It's a new land speed record in political cronyism, was that stimulus bill. President Romney will make the economy job one on day one, and the middle class will have an advocate in the White House to get the economy moving, get them hired, and start rebuilding their family nest eggs, which have just been absolutely gutted in recent years. So I think while there are plenty of things to talk about, what we're talking about now was President Obama's first priority, and that was political payoffs to his cronies. A President Romney's first priority, as measured by what he does when he arrives as president, will be to get the economy going. That's the major comparison here.
And there are no more questions at this time.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to everybody for joining us. That will conclude our call this afternoon, and we really appreciate you hopping on.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes your call. You may all disconnect at this time.